confirm if the variant evades immunity from previous infections, or crucially, if it weakens.
여러분 안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천하고 있는 동탄 왕코입니다. 오늘은 11월 27일인가요? 이제 올해도 한 달밖에 안 남았습니다, 여러분. 21년. 코로나가 시작된 지 2년이 다 돼가네요. 2년. 작년 1월 설날쯤부터 막 퍼졌죠. 아직 코로나는 끝나지 않았고 해외여행은 가지도 못하고 물론 갈 수는 있지만 자유롭게 못 가긴 하죠. 자, 내일도 한의원을 예약해놨고 요즘에 넷플릭스 지옥 너무 재밌죠. 지옥 너무 재밌고 그리고 또 뭐 있죠? 그리고 뭐 없네요. 뭐 없네. 운동합시다. 여러분 운동해야 돼요. 운동. 오늘 걷지 않으면 내일 뛰어야 됩니다. 여러분 운동합시다. 역시 운동할 땐 CNN이죠. 오미크론, 아미크론이라고 하나요? 또 저게 또 새로 나왔죠.
Going to offer to African countries to help us control the pandemic.
Countries in Africa, now Israel, Hong Kong and Belgium, have so far confirmed cases of the variant. And of course now the Netherlands would have confirmed cases on their shores. While the travel bans make a lot of sense to a lot of people and certainly politicians, here at least is what scientists have been telling me. They say, to use the cliche, the horse has already bolted. There's been several weeks, possibly, if not longer, of this variant circulating before it was picked up, even though it was announced as quickly as scientists could do it. And that means it's likely to be all over the place. And while it might slow slightly, this variant, at least these scientists say that it is too late to stop it. Okay?
All right, Dave McKenzie in Johannesburg. Thanks so much. I want to turn now to CNN producer Nana Bashir in London. So Nana, in the middle of the existing and growing surge of the Delta variant in Europe, now something new to contend with. So let's start on the latest on those cases on that flight in the Netherlands.
Absolutely, Kim. This is a major concern now. Europe in the last week, several countries have reported record-breaking figures in terms of the numbers of daily cases being recorded. And now this new variant has thrown into question whether or not the governments of Europe will be able to keep control over this pandemic. And you heard there in David's reporting, there has been some criticism coming from the WHO over that decision to impose travel restrictions. They've called it a hasty decision. They've warned against that. But really what we've heard from European leaders here is a need to act fast. Speaking yesterday, the UK Health Secretary Sajid Javid explained the UK's decision making on restricting those flights from the Southern African region and saying that if there's any lessons that have been learned from this pandemic, it's the need to act early at the earliest stage possible. And we've seen that reflected in the decision taken by the European Union, that collective decision now to impose travel restrictions, and that's all part of concerns over this potential spread of this variant. Yesterday we had the first confirmed case of this variant reported in Europe in Belgium. So there are of course concerns that this will now spread across the continent. And we've seen this happen before. Last winter, the spread of the Alpha variant, which really put healthcare sectors under immense pressure over the winter months. And of course, as you mentioned, the Delta variant, which is highly transmissible. And now as questions remain as to how transmissible this variant will be and its impact on vaccine efficacy, European leaders are really pushing to get this under control. There is a real sense of urgency now, as with the rising number of cases. But of course, as we move into the winter months, there will be greater emphasis on making sure that hospitals aren't put under the same amount of pressure we saw last winter. But if this does continue to spread, and if the fears that are being expressed by health experts that this could spiral out of control do come true, then there is a serious worry there for European leaders. Kim?
Absolutely. All right, Nana Bashir live in London. Thanks so much. I want to go now to CNN's Will Ripley, who's in Hong Kong. And Will, you're actually quarantining in the same hotel where Hong Kong's 2 cases were first discovered.
Yeah, that was certainly a surprise to check in and find out that there's a cluster of cases just 2 floors down from me here on the 7th floor. They're down on the 5th. A man from South Africa in his 30s tested positive, and within a week, another traveler in the opposite room tested positive as well, a man in his 60s. And so health authorities kind of puzzled to try to figure out how the virus jumped to another room in the same hotel. Is it going through the air ventilation system? They've now sent us all notices that we need to rent air purifiers for our rooms if we want to exercise in the room. They also pointed to the type of mask that the South African man was wearing as a possible factor here. But of course, the unknown is whether this virus is indeed more contagious. It was detected in the hallway between the two rooms, and we are allowed to open our doors when, of course, we have to put on masks when we do it, and you're supposed to change that mask every single time. But when you put out the trash or when you collect your food, you have to open up your door. And so I stuck my arm out the door last night and took some pictures to show you just how densely packed this particular hotel is. Every plastic covered chair that you see down the hallway, somebody is in a room there, and therefore you have a lot of people in a relatively closed space. And if there is a concern about air ventilation or there's not enough air filters, that could potentially be really problematic. But this is going to really put Hong Kong's very strict quarantine system to the test, this new variant, if indeed it is potentially more contagious, because Hong Kong already has one of the strictest quarantines in the world. I'm in a 14-day quarantine because I'm coming from an island that's considered to be low risk. That's Taiwan. Most people traveling in, and especially if they're not fully vaccinated, have a 21-day quarantine. And people down on the 5th floor in the adjacent 6 rooms in either direction from these positive cases, after they complete their quarantine here at the hotel, they then have to go to a government facility for an additional 14-day isolation period. So the Hong Kong government not taking any chances here, hoping to prevent some sort of an outbreak in this territory, which has a zero COVID strategy, just like mainland China, which of course is very determined to get their own local cases under control, and certainly want to let in any imported cases with just a matter of less than 3 months until the Beijing Olympics, when you have travelers coming in from all over the world. So certainly the timing of this potentially new, potentially more contagious variant is causing a lot of dread for a lot of people here, people who are just wanting to live their lives and not go back to the lockdowns that we lived through so many times during the pandemic, but also with this major international sporting event coming up. Kim?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Will Ripley live in Hong Kong. Thanks so much. Dr. Shoshana Unger-Leiter is a physician at the California Pacific Medical Center and founder of the EndWellProject.org. And she joins us now. Thank you so much for being here with us. So when the WHO says this is a, quote, variant of concern, what does that mean?
Well, Kim, from what we know so far, Omicron is a troubling new variant. When we think about emerging variants, we ask 3 important questions. 1, is it more transmissible than the current dominant Delta variant? 2, does it cause people to have more severe disease? And 3, can it evade immune protection? And based on what we know, which isn't very much at this point, it seems to be spreading quickly in South Africa and other neighboring countries, which is a sign that it may be highly contagious. We really don't know if it causes more severe illness. It's too early to tell. And it was first identified in South Africa earlier this month, and it's been reported in Europe and Asia. It has more than 50 mutations, the largest number of differences from the original virus that we've seen so far. And it has more mutations than we've ever seen in key regions of the virus, which is a red flag that it could be more difficult for our immune systems to recognize if we get exposed to it, even if we've received a COVID vaccine. But we just don't know yet. The WHO is proceeding with caution, which is warranted. There's a lot of information that's still missing, and things will unfold over the next several days.
Yeah, so much we still don't know. I mean, some variants, they didn't amount to much. I'm thinking of the Lambda variant here, but, some experts are saying that, if this is as different and as challenging as they think this might be, it might create a whole new pandemic. We may have to treat this like a whole new virus, I guess, depending on how it responds to the vaccine.
Well, Kim, this is a rapidly evolving situation with lots of unanswered questions still. Scientists across the world are looking very closely at this new variant of the coronavirus. They're sharing the sequence of this virus and what they know with each other. Right now, we know about the mutations, around 50 of them, which gives us a prediction of the virus's behavior. For example, that it could possibly evade immune protection. But in order to confirm this, scientists really need to test it in a lab, see if that's actually the case. And then across the world, genomic surveillance is underway to see where this new variant is cropping up. And then vaccine companies are now testing the ability of their vaccines to neutralize this variant. So, we're going to know more about this in the coming days and weeks.
So in response, we're now seeing countries rushing to establish these travel bans, for Southern African countries and so on. I mean, some experts argue that travel bans aren't really the answer here. Where do you stand on their effectiveness?
Well, Kim, what I can tell you is that in the US, COVID cases are up around 30%. When thinking about travel bans, I'm not so sure if that's the right approach. Compared to a month ago, we're way worse off here in the US than we were as we head into the holidays. What we do know is that our current vaccines work really well against all the other variants, Alpha, Beta, and Delta. And we know that getting a booster makes the vaccine work even better. So the main takeaway here for everyone is that if you haven't gotten boosted and you're 6 months out from Pfizer and Moderna or 2 months out from J&J, it's important to go get that booster dose and encourage everybody that you know to do the same right away. And certainly if you're still waiting to get a first shot, now is the time to get it. Everybody needs to show up, I think, with as much immune protection as they can for the holidays.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the lesson here, if we needed yet another lesson here, is basically it underlines the importance of having the whole world, not just developed countries, the whole world being vaccinated here. Otherwise, we're going to see more and more of these incubators of these different variants.
Kim, that's exactly right. We need to get as many vaccines in arms across the globe as fast as we can. And the US has done more than any other country to help other nations, actually. We've already sent out more than 250 million doses of vaccine. We've committed to more than 1 billion more. And we need to do this, not only for humanitarian reasons, but also for our own self-interest, right? Until the world is fully vaccinated, we may have to contend with more problematic variants.
All right. Well, as you said, so much we still don't know, but appreciate you sharing the information you do have, Dr. Shoshana Ungerleider. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
The world springs into action in the face of that new COVID threat. We'll have much more coverage on what's being done about the Omicron variant and a disturbing warning from Ukraine's leader about an alleged plot to overthrow his government. We'll tell you who he says is behind the planned coup when we come back. Stay with us.
The Royal Oak by Audemars Piguet was the world's first stainless steel luxury sports watch.
Famous watch designer Gerald Genta drew inspiration from a deep sea diver's helmet, which had an octagonal shape as well as riveted screws around the design.
It sold for around $3,000 when it was first released in 1972. And this was considered both by the industry and by the general watch buying public as just a piece of inexplicable insanity. You just didn't charge that for a stainless steel watch. And not only did they not go out of business, it has gone on to become the single most important watch commercially and aesthetically for Audemars Piguet. They're avidly collected. They are icons of modern watch design. It's gone on to become one of the most successful wristwatches of all time.
When you're on a motorcycle, you're experiencing the world in such a different way. When you hit the open road and there's nothing but kind of the sunset that you're chasing, it really does give you a sense of what it means to be alive. My name is Lauren Trantham, and I am the founder and executive director of Ride My Road. Ride My Road is a fundraising organization. We primarily operate within the motorcycle community to raise funds and awareness around the topics of human trafficking in the United States. In 2016, I was going through a divorce, and it was a really tough time for me. And so I decided to jump on my motorcycle and take my camera. I did 10,000 miles across America. I photographed 40 survivors. That was really how I began this journey, was more as a personal project as a photographer, with just this idea, this thought that can we heal a broken heart through helping others? Survivors are literally the best among us. They have persevered and have so much resilience, and we have so much to learn from them. We look at vulnerable people and think that maybe they're just cast aside or they're not important, but I think really we need to look to them if we want to move forward on issues like human trafficking.
In the hub, where East meets West, CNN Arabic is perfectly placed to find the facts. This is where stories happen. Politics, business, culture, real life. As the pace of change moves faster, we ask the important question. What is the truth? This is CNNArabic.com.
Ukraine's president is warning that a coup against him is planned to be carried out in a matter of days. Volodymyr Zelensky says he's received intelligence indicating that a group of Russians and Ukrainians are plotting the coup for the beginning of December. Now, it comes amid heightened tensions over the recent buildup of Russian troops along the Ukrainian border. CNN's Matthew Chance reports.
These are the sweeping allegations from the Ukrainian president. A serious and new threat posed by Russia against his government. We have information there will soon be a coup in our country, he announced at a roundtable discussion with journalists. It's in just a few days, he said, on the 1st or 2nd of December. The Kremlin denies any such plot. But it's a dramatic escalation in the war of words, as Russia is accused of massing forces near Ukraine's borders, poised to invade, which the Kremlin also denies. Now President Zelensky says he has intelligence, including an audio recording of Russians and Ukrainians discussing the plot against him, although no evidence has yet been made public. He also suggested Ukraine's richest man, this powerful oligarch called Rinat Akhmetov, who owns several critical media outlets, may have been involved, something strenuously denied to CNN by Akhmetov himself. The information made public by Volodymyr Zelensky about attempts to draw me into some kind of coup is an absolute lie, Akhmetov said in this written statement. As a Ukrainian citizen, the country's biggest investor, taxpayer and employer, Akhmetov continues, I will defend a free Ukraine and do everything I can to prevent authoritarianism and censorship. For years now, Ukraine has been facing enormous pressure from its powerful Russian neighbour, fighting a trench war with Russian-backed rebels in the country's east. It was the threat of holding back US military aid that led to former President Trump's first impeachment. Now, US officials say Russia is engaged in destabilising activities inside Ukraine as well, against the Zelensky government. It's one of the reasons the Ukrainian leader seems on edge, conscious he has enemies outside the country and within. But there are also fears he's using real concerns about Russia to crack down on his opponents too. Matthew Chance, CNN, London.
The US and its NATO allies will be discussing ways to deter Russia from further aggression against Ukraine at a summit in Latvia next week. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says the military buildup on the border is raising tensions and warns that Moscow must de-escalate and show transparency or there will be consequences. Here's what he told CNN on Friday.
If they, despite our clear message and the message for the whole international community, decides to violate international norms and rules and once again use military force against Ukraine, then there will be costs, there will be consequences for Russia. And there are different options that we can use. We saw after 2014 when they invaded Crimea and occupied Crimea, that part of Ukraine. Since then, all NATO allies have imposed severe economic sanctions on Russia, economic, financial sanctions, diplomatic reactions. And also NATO has implemented the biggest reinforcement since the end of the Cold War. For the first time in our history, we have combat-ready battle groups in the eastern part of the alliance.
Stoltenberg said NATO is actively monitoring Russia's military activities at the Ukrainian border. The diplomatic spat between France and the UK over how to handle migrant crossings is escalating. French President Emmanuel Macron has accused the British Prime Minister of not taking the situation seriously after Boris Johnson posted a letter he wrote to Macron on Twitter. CNN's Jim Bitterman joins me now from Paris. Jim, so despite all the accusations and finger pointing here, the two countries do need to make up and come back to the table to solve this very real problem.
Absolutely, Kim. I mean, the asylum seekers, the refugees, are caught up in the middle here. They're being used as kind of pawns in a political battle back and forth between Great Britain and France. And Emmanuel Macron and Boris Johnson have had a number of issues over this past few months here, including the submarine deal and the fishing rights and that sort of thing. And this is another issue which they've caused sorts, and it's led to pretty bitter reactions on both sides. I'll give you an example of what President Macron had to say. Apparently he was furious when his letter was published. Here's what he said.
Je suis surpris des méthodes. I am surprised at the methods when they are not serious. We don't communicate between one leader to another on these issues by tweeting and writing letters and making them public. We are not whistleblowers. Come on, come on. Sérieusement, pour régler une question sérieuse.
And so that kind of rhetoric you rarely hear in these kind of diplomatic channels. It's amazing to hear President Macron using those kind of words in a public forum like he was yesterday. So we're going to have to, I think, see some kind of positive attitudes here on both sides in order to get things going on the refugee issue. There's not a lot of things that they can do. They're going to have to have a large amount of discussion. And the French felt, and this was according to the government spokesman yesterday, that Boris Johnson was being two-faced. That basically he was saying one thing in a telephone conversation with President Macron 2 days ago, and that he was writing another thing in his letter, and the two did not correspond. One of the suggestions here by Sir Peter Ricketts, who is one of the former ambassadors to France from the UK, he said, why don't they just come up with a joint statement at the end of these phone conversations so that then people will be able to say that that's really what was discussed, Kim.
Yeah, okay, so the UK won't be there at the table this time. In the meantime, that meeting with the ministers from other European countries will still be going ahead. So what kind of options are you expecting them to discuss?
Well, it's really important that the UK be there, but if they're not going to be there, then the kind of things they can talk about are the smuggling networks that are promoting these kind of cross-channel refugee flights that we have seen. And they've got to, I think, come up with some ways to combat the smuggling. One of the things that's come out in this tragedy within the other day was that the boat, the rubber raft that was used, was purchased in Germany. And so they've got in this conference that's supposed to take place tomorrow, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, and the European Commission, and they're basically going to be talking about ways to break up smuggling networks and to capture the smugglers who are tempting the refugees to make these crossings with all sorts of promises about how easy it is, and you're just crossing a lake and the rest of it. The English Channel is not a lake. It's a very dangerous place, and the refugees are being taken for a ride by some of these smugglers. Yep.
All right, with deadly consequences sometimes. Jim Bitterman in Paris, thanks so much. The U.S. president closes the door on travelers from southern Africa. How it's planned? It's part of Joe Biden's plan to keep America safe from the new coronavirus variant, and 'tis the season for holiday shopping in the U.S., but not everyone's interested in buying Ahead, a string of brazen flash mob robberies has put some high-end retailers and their customers on edge. Stay with me.
There are places of change, places of transformation, places where moments of inspiration changed the world. The kind of place Oxygen will be. An open book for pivotal moments in history. A place where, if you have a dream, you'll find everything you need to make it happen, and nothing to stand in your way. This is the place where ideas can change the world. This is Oxygen.
Sunday on CNN.
Hey, I'm Anderson Cooper. I'm excited to let you know that my digital show Full Circle is back. You can watch every Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, 6 p.m. live Eastern Time or anytime on demand. And to make sure you never miss a show, you can get alerts on every episode via the CNN app. I'll see you then.
When you travel the world, make sure the world travels with you. Check in, log on, and get connected with all of the latest developments at your fingertips. CNN Partner Hotels, connected to your world.
I'm Matt Rivers in Ciudad Acuña along the U.S.-Mexico border. This is CNN.
Welcome back to all of you watching us here in the United States, Canada, and around the world. I'm Kim Brunhuber. This is CNN Newsroom. Our top story, the new coronavirus variant is grabbing the world's attention. The WHO is calling the Omicron variant a variant of concern. It was first identified in South Africa and has now been found in several other countries in the region. But cases have also been confirmed outside the continent, including Israel, Hong Kong, and Belgium.